Okay, maybe we can do a slow start. That way, and then if anyone comes in, they're more than welcome to come in. How's everyone? Hi, good evening. Thanks for coming out on an evening to talk about anxiety. My husband asked if I was nervous, and I said, I talk about this all the time. I think in my dreams and my sleep, and I think about it, and I talk about it, and I look at memes about it, and I laugh about it. So I love talking about anxiety, and it's not a front that I'm actually excited to talk about it. I'll tell you why in a minute. But I'm really excited, moreover, to hear from our panelists, my friends who are going to be sharing this evening. I'll share who I am first. If you don't know me, I'm Sarah Prince. I am an author, a speaker, a pastor, and a new life coach. And we have been traveling the world of neurodivergent children for a long time. So that's my parenting journey. Also a journey of having anxious children all the time. I have two kids, they're 15 and 12 now, almost 12. And I have generalized anxiety disorder, which I only got diagnosed in my 30s, but was a very anxious child. And I love living in a world where as parents, we could talk about this stuff and we could put it out there, and we don't have to live like I did, which was in secret and embarrassed and shameful and just trying to get it together for years and years and years. It was freedom to finally get a diagnosis, and I have more anxiety than most, but to get a diagnosis, to get help, to get tools, and now to walk with my kids with those tools and with other incredible adults that can love them and journey with them. It's very empowering. So that's why I really, really do like talking about it. But it is a lived experience in my own body and life, and it's lived in my kids' life. So it comes fresh out of the oven in my world. Okay, I'd like to introduce our panelists tonight. This is Henry Hayes. Henry Hayes is a teacher at Sun Valley Primary, right over there. He is the grade head of grade 7. He's been teaching for 7 years. That's like how many years it's like dog years. How many? Yeah, but it's like exponentially more if you're a teacher of years.
21 years.
Yeah, at least 21 years. Henry's a great friend and was a teacher twice to my daughter, God bless him, and walked very closely with my daughter in anxiety and a lot of other kids. So he has been right there in the classroom with kids, dealing with this and walking with them, which is really incredible. Introduce next Kirsty Schlesinger. Kirsty is a professional counselor and the founder of KS Counseling and Mediation. She specializes in mediation, trauma, and relationship counseling. She has got 2 kids, married, an incredible family, and also walked an incredible journey with kids that just needed extra support. And she's done it really beautifully and now walks alongside other people. And I'm honored to have you here and to share your wisdom as a therapist, but also just as a mom. And this is my good friend, Andrea Skippers. Andrea is a former Silvermine Academy student, and she has worked extensively in many roles. I think if your actual CV would be like a scroll, all the roles, even just at Ubuntu Football. So our family run a football academy called Ubuntu Football. She has been a teacher there. She has been, I'm sure, a coach. You've lived at the house in multiple roles, our academy house. She's basically done everything there, a counselor as well. She now has a BA in psychology and communications. She's currently finishing her honors, and she has a passion for sports psychology, but also has been on a panel of mine about teens and anxiety, and she loves sharing her own experience as a teenager with anxiety, and has helped many, many young men in our program also work through their stuff. So these are 3 incredibly wise people, and you'll learn that very quickly. So I don't want to spend too much time introducing us.
A lot of pressure, Sarah.
I know, but I really like you guys. I really like you.
Start us slow.
Keep going down on the street, I don't know. Okay, so what is anxiety? Because anxiety and stress is different, right? In my household growing up, I had anxiety in my body every day, just flaming anxiety. My sister had stress, so when exams happened, she would stress, and it would be a situational thing, and stress would come up, and it showed itself as anxiety, but that was just a stressful situation. Anxiety is different. The DSM-V defines it: generalized anxiety, excessive anxiety and worry about a number of activities or events occurring more days than not for at least 6 months. So that's how you get like an actual diagnosis of you have an anxiety disorder or generalized anxiety. It can feel in your body: restlessness, feeling on edge, you get tired easily, difficulty concentrating, feeling like your mind is blank, irritability, muscular tension, sleep disturbances. Again, all these could be a bad day, they could be anything. But when they're together for a long period of time, often a doctor can then prescribe, can help and say, this is the diagnosis, which is what I got in my 30s. So these are symptoms to look at if you're just looking at the base symptoms. These are some stats before we jump in to how we can engage this. The Child Mind Institute, which is in the States, says 19.3% of teens have a specific phobia. 9.1% of teens have a social anxiety disorder. I think this is definitely increasing. 7.6% of teens have separation anxiety. These are teens, not little kids. 2.3% of teens have panic disorder. And 2.2% of teens have generalized anxiety disorder. That means anxiety is living in their bodies every day. In addition, the National Institute of Mental Health reports that 31.9% of teens have some type of anxiety disorder. So that's not an anxious day, that's not a test, that's not my boyfriend broke up with me or I'm obsessed with him. That's actually something that needs assistance with. 8.3 of those have an anxiety disorder that has severe impairment as a result. And I want you to know, I go into this because I did not have a severe impairment. Looked like I was doing my best. I was living my best life. I was a cheerleader. I was getting fine grades. I was cheating a lot, but I was getting fine grades. I was presenting like I had a boyfriend. I had friends. I went to college. I got married at 22. I became a pastor. I was happy. And yet I was not. I was struggling. And so that's what we want to, as parents and as caregivers, as adults, lean in differently. Because sometimes it's crippling and you know the house is on fire, but often you won't with anxiety. So how can we step in before that happens? Okay, so I have some questions and I'm going to pose it to people. But if anyone wants to jump in, please do. And we're going to try to keep this to an hour. I don't have my watch, but you have a clock here.
The youngsters.
I really like time. We could talk about this for 5 hours. I don't think we're going to get tired if we do that. So we're gonna cap it. And I'm actually proposing to do an online chat in like 2 months. I'll tell you about that later. So we can keep talking about this. Okay, let's talk about as a teenager or as a kid. What does it feel like to have anxiety? I would love to have it expressed. Andy, let's start with you. Talk about as a kid, as a teen, what it felt like in your body to have anxiety.
So the first time I kind of realized, something's not quite right was when I was about 11 years old, and I always struggled to fall asleep, and my parents had to sit with me or have a light on for a really, really long time, like longer than I always like to admit. But late into my teens, I still needed someone by my side. And I remember lying in bed as an 11-year-old in grade 5, everything's normal and fine, and kind of just realizing like how small I am in my room and how small I am in my house. And it literally just started to build and build and build. My eyes were closed and I could feel like I was sort of disappearing into the vast universe. And I remember thinking, well, this is how I die, because I started to basically have a panic attack and my breathing started to kind of go all funky and I was feeling extremely out of control. And eventually drifted off to sleep with this and woke up the next day and kept going, and I didn't tell my parents. I didn't think much of it. I just thought, it's life, whatever. So that was the first time, if I look back, thinking, oh no, you had a panic attack in bed and you couldn't fall asleep because you thought your life was ending because you couldn't breathe. And that is one of the ways that anxiety can manifest, is in such a physical sensation. And I didn't know or have the language for that as 11. But later on it became, oh, Andy, you're so emotional, you are always reactive, you're not responsive, you're spending a lot of time in your room by yourself. And if I think back on the isolation that I felt or imposed on myself, is because I was constantly overwhelmed by things happening around me. So whether that was my parents asking me questions about my day, that would be such a trigger. I'm like, how dare you ask? Please stop it. Like, I'm fine. Like, no, I don't have homework. Yes, I have a test. Will I study for it? No. Like, it's just not gonna happen. You know this. And so it's just like very, very short with my parents as well. Like, my mom would be like, I don't know what's going on in your life and I can't ask you a question because you're gonna react in a very like aggressive and emotional manner. And then, so that's kind of like my behavior at home, and at school it would manifest, I think, differently. I don't know, I think I was a good student. But I know I dedicated myself to my schoolwork in class, but then at home it would be procrastinate till the last minute. And then it would be like this massive project and my parents would ask me, how can they help? And it would be like, done. Like World War III, here we go. How dare they ask me to help? I can manage this on my own, I'm fine. And then, 4 or 5 hours later, tears, lots of cups of tea, parents trying their best to calm me down, I would finally be able to sit and maybe do the 50-word answer that I had to produce on a question. So it's just a lot of being overwhelmed and not knowing why necessarily. So it was normal things in my parents' opinion, because that's just how they, knew what to do with school and with life and emotions. But the way it presented was extreme, and I think that was hard to deal with.
Yeah, I can relate to so much of that. And I think for me, now I've been diagnosed with ADHD, and so I have anxiety and ADHD. So with ADHD, then you have impulsivity, and you have extra emotional responses and dysregulation. And so take that and then like multiply it were my responses. And again, also in school, I would often hold it together. So if a teacher is seeing it, that means you're really not holding it together, because I also wanted to be a good girl. So I held it together in school and with people that I wanted attention from, and at home it came undone. But honestly, Andy had a much safer upbringing, has incredible parents. My parents, I rarely felt like I could let it out. I felt like I had to keep it in, and it was just, the voice was like, get it together. And I wanted to be good for my parents also. I wanted to like them to be proud of me. And so I just kept it locked in. And at night it came out a lot. I was insomniac. My parents wouldn't come sit with me. But I was up all night. I would cry, especially in high school. I would just start to cry at night, because you get past the like 2-hour mark and then you just panic, like, oh my God, now I'm gonna be tired tomorrow. Now I'm gonna be cheerleading practice to be bad, and now my boyfriend's gonna be mad. It would just like, it would turn into an attack, like a panic attack, once you couldn't sleep. And it was just all these, it just all kept piling up, and no one knew. I just kept it all in. And they say that anxiety and depression can be bedfellows, and so I had a season in high school where I was depressed and I had suicidal ideation, and it didn't last long because I wanted to get it together and be a good girl and be the cute person I was supposed to be. So I just pushed it down and got over it. And even in college, it still came in many different ways. In college, I had an eating disorder because I was still just trying to control this anxiety, but it was just raging. It feels like this like raging fear, confusion, fire in your body, and it will come out. It will come out. And that's the thing. If you're a parent, and all of us, there's a time to say like, just eat your vegetables. But if you have anxiety in your body, even if it's situational or it's generalized anxiety, it's just part of your chemical makeup. You can't just get it together. You can't just get over it. Like, a parent has to help build a bridge. Only in my 30s did I find those bridges. And it's not the fault of my parents. They did the best they could. They didn't have those tools. But now we know better. And it just all lived in here until it, my life almost came apart in my 20s.
I think like the whole eat your vegetables thing, it's like those small tasks that's like day to day. It's like, come on, put on your shoes, like whatever, your socks are fine. It's like, no, they're not. Like, so for me, it was a lot of things came out of sensory issues. So I was very particular about the kind of clothing I wanted to wear, and like how my socks had to be, and like if things weren't like laid out in the right way, like I would get so panicked I can't think about anything else. And then it would just like, the reaction was always excessive and extreme. And my mom is a very like mind over matter type of person, so it was always hard for her to kind of understand why am I mattering so much about these things and can't get my mind to just like get over this hill. And so like that also caused tension, because then I was like, I know you don't understand why I just cannot do this thing right now. And then it would take like 30-40 minutes to like just somehow self-regulate and then do the actual thing. Like the thing happens, but it's like you need time for it. It's those small things are impossible.
Okay, we could talk, Eddie and I could talk all day about this, but Henry, I'd love to hear from a teacher in the classroom. You've had many classrooms with many anxious kids, one of them mine. How do you spot anxiety? Every kid has a stressful day, every kid dysregulates. How do you spot a kid where in the classroom, how does it look when there's a kid that you're like, oh, this kid is struggling with anxiety?
Well, growing up, I always thought that I had anxiety until I started to identify what anxiety actually looked like. I was also the same. I didn't enjoy sleeping in my own room at night. I loved sleeping in my parents' room, especially when it got dark. But as time's moved on and as I've gotten older, I've realized that I stress a lot more than anxious. So listening to you speak, I feel like there's a lot of things that I don't have. But before I start, I just want you to know that I do enjoy teaching. Teaching is a passion. It's lovely, it's amazing. not all our kids have anxiety. Some of them love being in the four walls of the classroom, but you always have the select few that really, really do struggle. And as an educator, especially in the beginning, it was really difficult to identify whether the kid was being difficult or whether the kid was anxious. And as a young teacher and as an educator in the classroom from the beginning, sometimes you can get yourself into a bit of an issue because you're reprimanding this kid for acting out rather than identifying the issue. But I wrote a few things down. We live in a world where social media is such a big platform that all of us are on. These kids have such high expectations of themselves. Every post that they look at, every story they look at, everything on TV is of these perfect bodies, these perfect people, living their perfect lives. And that is what they aspire to be like. And what they don't realize that these people aren't actually living their best lives. They are putting on a front whereby they're trying to portray what a good life looks like. We also have kids in the classroom now that have just gone through a massive global pandemic, whereby their social skills are not as they used to be. They're not used to being in a classroom that is super busy. We have classrooms of up to 34 learners. The auditory, everything triggers them. We live in such a beautiful country, but also a country that is so diverse. I have kids in my class that live in Massey and have absolutely nothing. And right next to them is a person who lives in Noordhoek in a 30 million rand house. And I have kids asking me, sir, how is that fair? Like, how am I born in an environment where I don't have the same opportunities and how do you answer that as an educator? And as I've grown and as I've worked in the class a lot often, I started to see the signs. Those kids don't put up their hands in class. They're way too scared to make mistakes. So often I'll say, my boy, why aren't you asking a question? Well, sir, I don't feel comfortable. You'll normally find that they stop playing sport. They come home, Mom, I really don't feel like playing sport this afternoon. I really don't want to be in a team sport. Another sign of anxiety, they don't want to let their teams down. Often they'll come to school without their homework done. And the first thing the teacher will do is, why didn't you do your homework? Instead of identifying the issue. Kieran, for example, why is the homework not done? The reason the homework's not done is they're too scared to disappoint you. They're too scared to disappoint their parents. They'd rather wait the whole term, get that report card, and you can see them sit opposite you as an educator and you can just see them absolutely broken. Other things is, as I said earlier, the one thing is they hate making mistakes. They are so hard on themselves. They feel like they always have to be perfect. They always have to be dressed well. They have to have the perfect makeup. And I teach a lot of girls who are becoming teenagers. They always have to have the latest shoes. Mom, I have to. And I remember being a kid myself and going to my mom and being like, I have to have those, else I won't be cool. Just other things. Another big one is often feeling ill. Feeling sick, sir, I have a really sore stomach. Can I go home? And you start to pick up those signs. So I'm really not having a good day. So those are the little things that I have picked up along the way. At first, it's really difficult to identify who's just having a really bad day, who's the teenagers that are going through the hormones and whatnot that comes with being a teenager, and then identifying actually, no, this kid is really, really struggling. And it's normally those few things that I mentioned. Also lashing out, lashing out at our parents, lashing out our friends, saying mean things, swearing, fighting on the fields. Often those are the things that I've picked up since being in the class. It's been quite interesting to identify that I actually don't suffer with anxiety every single day of my life. I have moments that I really struggle with, like sitting here today, just and then I realized half the crowd was my family, so I felt okay. But yeah, these are little things that make me anxious, and often I can say to myself that I often lash out when I'm anxious. Often when I wake up and I'm anxious, I'm not having a good day, I lash out and I take it out on other people. I hate making mistakes. I hate playing sport. Although I love it so much, sometimes I don't want to because I'm scared I'm going to let my team down. So yeah, those are some of the things that I've identified in the class.
Yeah, I knew Henry would be great to speak on this because he's such an incredible teacher and so empathetic and so tuned in. Not all teachers are going to be like that, but if you have a teacher that is tuned in and you feel like they're dialed in, I really encourage, if you can, even in high school, to try to have these conversations with a teacher because they've seen it, they've been around, and they have a wisdom that you don't have. And I think It's hard as a parent, but I think most teachers want to partner with you. They want the best for your kids, and they want your kids to succeed. And whatever is holding them back, they want to help build that bridge together. And so we've just been really blessed to have Henry in our life to walk through some stories with our daughter. Kirsty, I'd love to hear from a therapist's perspective, how do you spot anxiety in your child, especially when we're saying we're trying to hide it off and we're trying to mask it? A lot of kids with anxiety are trying to mask it. What are ways that you can see this is an anxious kid?
You don't really need me because you just listed all the diagnostic criteria.
Well, tell us. Reaffirm us.
Mine's a little bit more listed rather than a story because I've simplified the diagnostic criteria so it's a little bit more easy to understand. But some of the things you've mentioned, physical symptoms, headaches, sweating, sore stomachs, trembling, these are often in teens who are masking their anxiety. Mm-hmm. So you can see it coming out more physically. Mm-hmm. Changes in behavior like irritability and avoidance behavior, so they'll avoid situations and circumstances that they have usually been okay with doing. Difficulty concentrating, the school performance is hindered, in their academics will drop, and then you can notice something is not quite right. And just to mention that you're not necessarily going to see all of these in your teens. Every person's different, so they come out in different ways. And perfectionism, you mentioned this need to get everything right and to be their best selves, which essentially isn't a bad thing, but it's also a way of controlling. If I'm anxious about a situation, I will do whatever I can to control the situation, to be the best that I can be, so I don't have to have these feelings, because feelings of anxiety are so overwhelming sometimes, as you've all highlighted, and the kind of behavior that it causes. Social withdrawal and avoidance behaviors, you notice they don't want to be around friends and family, things that they used to find easy to do and okay to do, they will avoid those activities. Changes in eating habits, eating too much, starting to eat too much, or not eating at all. This is also a way to recognize anxiety. Excessive reassurance and validation-seeking behaviors. So they will always be talking to you about their concerns and their fears, and looking for you to validate their concerns and fears, and to discuss it with them. And then changes in mood, anger, irritability, frustration, angry outbursts, and things like that are all to be looked out for. These are some of the signs that you can see in a child or a teen that's struggling with anxiety.
Yeah.
Teens are more able to verbalize than children, I found.
Yeah, 100% right. That's good. Okay, I'd love to hear Henry and Andrea from both of you. Maybe you can start. There's two questions, but pick what you want. Andrea, we'll start with you. The question is, how do you teach kids to notice and identify anxiety in themselves? And how can they learn to self-regulate when we're not there? So often as parents, we're kind of trying to bubble wrap our kids, and we see some of these things and we help them, but eventually they're at school, then they're teenagers, and they need to learn to identify it themselves and then begin to self. So it's just the beginning. We're going to talk about other ways to support, but Andy, I'd love for you to share your own experience. How did you begin to identify that and start to find some regulation?
That's a hard question. I think I'm still trying to figure it out and learn as I go. But I think I talk a lot. And so when I start to spiral a bit, it's like I get very repetitive in what I'm saying. And my parents have pointed this out to me, but I've also started to notice that, okay, I'm saying this thing, and this is really, frustrating me, and then I go, and then I come back to the same thing, and I'll just say the same thing over and over again, and it's like, all of a sudden, I can't say a sentence, and it's just like, and so that often is a little bit too late when you're like, oh, what's happening? But it is a good way to start to recognize, oh, I've really circled this one thought maybe 5 times in the last 30 seconds. Let me just take a minute. What am I actually trying to get to? What am I actually trying to say? I think anxiety is often, or the little triggers or signs of anxiety is often a signal flaring something else is going on. It's often not about, eating your vegetables or having to wake up to go to school. There's something else that's actually going on. And I always used to have to stop myself and be like, okay, cool. what happened in the last 24 hours, or what's going to happen in the next 24 hours that I might be anxious about. So that's the one thing, is like just kind of talking in circles is something that I started to notice I would do. And then truly, when working, so when I was a teacher at the Ubuntu school, I was working with kids also with anxiety and very high levels of energy. They were about 12 years old. And then matching that, my anxiety of standing in front of them and trying to like get them all to listen, and then them like building. It was just like, sometimes we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, we're gonna just take a few minutes and we're just gonna settle down. Do we need to walk outside? Do we need to listen to music? Like, what are we gonna do to just, because it's just this energy that builds up, and sometimes it comes out in a very positive way. Like, it's like everyone's like kind of nervous energy, and then other times it can fluctuate into a bit more of like an outburst or like an aggressive kind of lashing out situation. And when you can feel that energy in a classroom or with another kid, sometimes it's just helpful to either move our body or to take a minute, like let's just breathe, and then let's try this again. So if I'm talking in circles, let me just take a step back, give me like a minute to think, let me clear my thoughts, and then I can go again. Or if I'm feeling very like scratchy and can't sit still, hey, let me get up, let me change the position I'm in, maybe go to a different room, like just reset like my environment. That's also been kind of helpful for me to go back and finish the task at hand that I'm feeling nervous about.
Can I, before you go, say something opposite of that? I've noticed with my kids, so our life is very busy and very chaotic, so our kids they don't really have time to spend. I think they would love to spend and be anxious about things, but they don't have time, so it'll come out in outbursts. So what I try to do is what you said, like I come back to it. And so if I feel it, if I notice it, or if I notice some behaviors coming out, I'll just at another time revisit it with them, because they don't always have the time. And a lot of our kids, their schedules are like jam-packed. Like, and I feel the same. I don't always have time to I need to have a breakdown about this right now, but I'm gonna have to chair it. And I think that's actually not a bad thing to teach kids and to model for them. So I try to model too, like, we're gonna break down about this, or we're gonna need to talk about this, and I just revisit. I just kind of park it at a time and come back to it, because the truth is you can't really solve it in the moment. If you're an anxious body and soul and mind, you're not gonna figure it out at the moment. So it's actually better to bring it back. But my kids don't have that luxury, so I just try to help them remember to circle back to it, because I know that I need that, because it doesn't help if your life is so busy that you never go back to it. Your body eventually builds it up. So I think that coming back to something is something I've really tried to help them do. Let's circle back to that moment and come back to something that flared in a weird way. Okay, let's talk about the classroom. What are something you want to say? How do you think you can start to teach kids? I mean, you've done this to begin to self-regulate.
It's quite difficult, because in a class of 34, the first thing, especially with a teenager, they don't want to be seen as vulnerable. So my first step is always to educate myself first and foremost. I think
great tip.
We were at university for 4 or 5 years. Not once did I learn about anxiety and how to deal with kids with anxiety. So it's something you learn in the classroom. And before you can teach or speak into a kid's life on anxiety, you have to educate yourself first and be able to identify where the issues are. The second thing you need to do is normalize the teenagers' feelings and emotions in the classroom. So if they're feeling a certain way, or if they have an opinion about something, validate it. Maybe teach them around that and validate how they feel about something, and express that you agree in some sense with them. And then the next thing I try to do is I try to tell my kids that anxiety is normal. It's not normalized, because kids don't feel like they can often speak up about it. But I try to allow my learners to feel that they're safe with me. If they do feel like there's an issue, or they feel like something's wrong, they have the opportunity to come speak to me. Once I've done all of those things, and if you work at Sunvalley, you realize, especially I'm sure you would realize, I'm outside my class a lot more than I'm in it. Some years, because some years you just have kids that really need one-on-one.
They're actual psychopaths.
And so, they
my
are.
daughter's class is like literal monsters.
And you put yourself in a bit of a tricky situation, because once you've made yourself vulnerable to those learners, every day it's like, sir, can we speak in private? So you almost have to have a balance, where you're like, guys, I have time set aside for those one-on-ones. Never take a kid and express their feelings and emotions in front of the rest of the kids. Always take them out the class, and that can be difficult. You teach a math lesson, someone puts, so can we have a one-on-one? It's not the right time. But yeah, what I do is I'd often take them out, I'll have a one-on-one with them, see how they're feeling, see how they can express their feelings, their opinions, understand what they're saying. I'm not always going to understand, I'm not always going to get it, but I give them the opportunity to speak, and then I'll chat, and then sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, most of the time it's not. But just because I've taken the time out of my day to make them feel seen and heard, that often does help them just to get through the end of the day. And then again, we start the next day and we start over again.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's a great tip for parents, you know, to learn about it and then to create space. And you can't always, in the middle, right now, stop everything, you know. Sometimes you have to share it and you come back to it, but like...
And you do make yourself vulnerable, because then it's like, well, we do have a counselor, would you like? No, thank you. So you do have to create those relationships first before you can dive into these.
And it's great, And I think, you know, there's some old saying, because we did youth ministry at a church, my husband and I, for years. We always work with teens, and they say you actually need 6 adults in each child's life, at least, healthy adults. And this is why, you know, you're not going to catch everything, you know. So if you're a parent, you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much I missed, which is what I think all the time. You're supposed to have Henrys in your life, you know, you're supposed to have Andys, you're supposed to have Kirsty's in your life, you're supposed to have all these people, and that sounds luxurious, but I don't think it's impossible, especially in the Valley. We're such a communal place, and it's really important to have other adults that can have these conversations. There's a time where, okay, we need to go see a counselor, or we need to go get an assessment, but before that, you only get to that place where if you need outside help, you get through a lot of conversations with incredible adults, and we wouldn't be where my daughter is without incredible teachers like Henry and the other teachers at that school and where she is now. But partner with your teachers, you know, they're there to partner with your kids. And then they're also there to be honest and say, you know, I think we need outside help for this, which is what Henry said to me, that this is something bigger than a teacher can assess and work with. Okay, so Kirsty, I'd love to hear from you. What do you, as a parent, and if you're a therapist talking to a parent, how does a parent know, okay, we need outside resources, we need a counselor, we need something more than a teacher, a friend, a coach? How do you know, like, okay, it's time to ask for outside help?
So, I mean, the things that I've mentioned are obviously to look out for, but things can start to get worse. You know, you get, they start to have sort of persistent feelings of being down, and that often you've got to be careful of that, because anxiety and depression go together often. So yeah, persistent sadness and moodiness, and changes in their sleep patterns, difficulty sleeping, difficulty staying asleep, difficulty falling asleep, nightmares and things like that. And then self-destructive behaviors like self-harming, substance use, and risky behaviors. A lot of it can be around sexual risky behaviors. And then talk of hopelessness and feeling worthless and feeling like a burden. And this goes a lot with depression as well. Changes in hygiene and self-care, and then obviously difficulties coping with stress. Things that happen in the family and happen in their lives which are not huge, but they actually just can't cope. And then expressing suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideation. This is something that can't be messed with. If your child is talking about suicide and there's suicidal ideation, they need professional help immediately. And if that includes an emergency room, then it includes an emergency room. My nephew, I'll just tell a story. So my nephew was 16 and he was 90% aggregate, went to Bridge House on a scholarship in a very high-flying team. And he started to have troubles at school, on social media, on WhatsApp. And he's ADHD and very impulsive. And he started talking about suicide. And so my sister, they didn't take it seriously enough for quite a long time. And then it got worse and worse and worse. And he was talking about how he wanted to commit suicide. So she set up an appointment with a psychiatrist and a psychologist with a lot of pressure from me. And that week he hung himself. He survived, but now he's no longer a 90% student. He barely passed the trick. He had to redo grade 11. And when my sister looked at his phone, which she did never monitor children's phones, there was just and his computer, there was just reams and reams and reams of searches on how to end your life. If she'd been on his phone and checked on his phone, she would have been more on top of it. He should have been in the emergency room the week before he tried to take his life.
Yeah, and I will just say, I think, you know, from my parents, I look back, hearing all the things up to suicidal ideation were part of my resume as a teenager. Everything that you're saying, it was alarming, and my parents didn't do anything. And I think they, again, I love them. I think they were doing the best they felt they could, but they just were so crippled by the fear of what if something's wrong? Like, oh my God, what if something's wrong? I think they just held their breath for like all those years. You know, I think they just didn't breathe. And then when I left for college and was happy again, then they didn't breathe. And they'd be like, okay, everything's fine. I know it's going to be fine. And I wish they had just asked more questions. I wish they had taken me to get help much earlier. In college, when I finally confessed an eating disorder, they never asked about it again. You know, I think they just didn't know how, and they just were so scared. They were so scared, and they loved me so much that it just drowned them in their fear. And don't let that be us. Let's try to just, you know, step in and be safe and just talk and ask questions. Because it is possible. And I love people in my world like Andy, and hearing her story of her family who just came in, her mom who didn't understand, and she just kept showing up, and she just kept showing up. She just kept showing up. Henry, who doesn't understand this, and for my kid, just kept showing up, kept showing up, kept showing up. That's what it means. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to have the solution, but just come in, you know? To love and to stay out. To the teen feels like you're being abandoned. Come in, come in, come in, come in. But there's definitely help where you need therapeutic care. And it's, for me, and I'm a unique case, but it's been years and years of therapeutic care and medicine. But it's freedom. But if it's one therapy session, great. If you go to a doctor and they say, your child's perfect, you're overreacting, everything's great, great. That would be, you know, a waste of money. That'd be a great waste of money. But often these kids will only grow and benefit from help. Okay, talk briefly. Oh, good, a little music break, just to liven us. So I can chat about, you know, therapies I've done, which are many. Kirsty, will you share for kids and teens? What are some therapeutic supports? Like, if you're like kind of curious, I want to learn about this. What would it look like?
I'm skipping a section, but that's fine.
Are you?
Okay, so everybody's different. Every teen is different.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the support that's offered fits every teen. So there's lots of different things that can be done. Therapy or counselling. Cognitive behavioural therapy is a very good therapy tool for anxiety. The negative thought patterns are addressed. Coping strategies are explored. And then it's a safe environment for them to sort of go express their fears and to talk through their fears. The word that no parent ever wants to hear, and I just get a reaction every time, is medication. Medication sometimes does have its place when anxiety is very severe and some of the other strategies that have been put in place aren't working. People often take their teens or themselves to a GP. I have no problem with a GP giving medication, but it's good to go to a GP that specialises in mental health. There's so many different types of medication. Not all medication fits the individual. So a psychiatrist or a GP, and often serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, are given for anxiety. And support groups. There are not a lot of support groups around, but support groups, the Connect group, which operates out of the CHS Life Centre at Kirstenhof, offers support groups for teenagers. Very helpful because they're sitting with a group of people who they can relate, and obviously sitting with a facilitator who can give them advice and strategies to cope. And then school counselling, of course. Most schools offer counselling, which will have the school counsellor, psychologists, at times more in the private schools. Social workers can offer counselling, come up with support strategies to help them with their education and accommodations for exams and tests. And then there are a lot of online resources and apps. Mindfulness techniques, breathing exercises, cognitive behavioural therapy tips, articles, and also a platform where they can chat to other people struggling with anxiety. which is always a bit tricky because you don't know who's lurking on these platforms. And then, of course, parental support and involvement. It's invaluable. No teen struggling with any kind of mental health issues can do it alone without their parents. And then, of course, physical activities, mindfulness practices, exercises known to increase a sense of well-being and help with mental health. And yoga, deep breathing exercises, meditation. And then healthy lifestyle habits, exercise, eating well, keeping yourself hydrated, having adequate sleep. And then family therapy can be very effective because it affects the whole family. So it opens up communication, a mental health professional who can help discuss the difficulties and a way forward for the family.
Amazing. Andy, will you speak just briefly on how you started to get some breakthrough as a teen and young adult in your anxiety?
Yeah, so the first time my parents were, because I was quite the emotional person compared to my other two siblings, my parents were quite responsive of like, oh, she's telling us things, what should we do with that? And so the first time I went to a child psychologist, I was 9, and the child psychologist basically just told my parents, just let her be for now. Like she's going through it, but just like let her be and just be there. So lean in, but don't try and fix anything right now. And so that was, I think, a very eye-opening thing for them. And so throughout my teen years, they were always there and always just kind of like letting me be. And to an extent, I learned to self-regulate quite late. So around when I went to varsity, around 18, 19 was when I started to have panic attacks driving to varsity, and I would have to pull over, and I would never be able to do my assignments and have to like all-nighter it because the pressure and the stress and everything just got too much. And yeah, to the point where my mom was like, what are we gonna do? What do you wanna do? And so she kind of acknowledged and voiced that she's noticing this is more than I can handle and more than they can handle, but she put the ball in my court. And so since I was studying psychology, I had a lot of information in my textbooks to go look at and think about what are the options. And so when I was 19, I started therapy. And then I was put on a natural supplement, which really just kind of boosted the natural emotional baseline, because my baseline was very low. And so I just needed that extra support. And just that little bit of support helped me to sleep better. It helped me to concentrate better. I was able to, not let things spiral into a panic attack, or when I started to feel it coming on, I would go to my mom or whoever was around me and say, hey, this is happening, what do I do? And they could sit with me while I kind of figure it out. And I've been in therapy for like 3.5 years now. And it's something that, I think changed a lot of how I thought and felt about the anxiety that I was experiencing. And I think that change shifted a lot in how I spoke about it, how I spoke to my parents about it, how they were able to come and support me. Like I mentioned earlier, I love to talk, and I would tell my parents what my therapist was saying. Like, I was like, okay, so this is what we spoke about, and then this is what she said, and then da-da-da-da-da. And my parents would use those tools that I basically offered them by telling them exactly what you told me to remind me in those moments where I would be overwhelmed or feeling like lost, to be like, hey, like, have you tried this again? I was like, oh yeah, good point. And because my therapist said it, not them, I was like, I'll take it, like, I'll do it. I'll go for the walk, I'll make a cup of tea or whatever it was. So that's really when, around 19, when the breakthrough happened and I asked for help. It's brilliant.
Sarah, can I tell a story about someone I worked with? So I worked with a girl who's 17, and her mom phoned me because she said, my daughter's struggling with anxiety, can she come and see me? And when she came to see me, she was struggling with, her anxiety was so bad that she was struggling with OCD behaviors. Every time she changed, she showered. She couldn't wear clothes for longer than a period of time. Every time she got into the bed, she changed the linen, and she had ways of packing her cupboard. So she sort of took, this is for this time, that's for that change. So and it was really crippling her life a lot. And we used a lot of mindfulness techniques and developed some coping strategies that suited her life. But what came out of the counselling was that she was struggling at home with the relationship with her dad, and it was causing her so much stress. And so these behaviours she had to sort of control the deep emotions that she was feeling. So when we worked through some of those deep emotions, and her and her dad were able to talk, and he was able to get an understanding of where she was at and her needs from him as a father, those behaviours decreased. I mean, she didn't completely get rid of those behaviours, but she was more able to cope with, okay, I don't need to do this now, I don't need another shower because I showered an hour ago. And so just coming for counselling helped her a lot. But it was the deeper things, it's often the deeper things that do need to be addressed as well. It's not just the outside.
For sure. That's so good. Yeah, and that leads into I was going to just share briefly about my experience in therapy. So got through to 18, held it together. I was a good girl till 18. Then I went to college and was still a good girl, had an eating disorder. Someone found out. I was like, oopsies, that's gross. So I told my now husband, I have an eating disorder. And then I told my parents, I have an eating disorder. And they were like, everyone was like, okay. And then I was like, I'm going to stop. And then I just stopped because I was like, I'm going to be good. So then I pulled it together. So then I graduated college and I got married 3 weeks later. And then I started at seminary to become a pastor, my graduate work. And that's when it began to the wheels began to come off right as I got married, which is, it was all a little quick looking back. And so I started having migraines, bad headaches first, and then pushed through, white knuckled it, actually started to get lots of tests for my migraines, eventually got on a migraine medicine that actually helped anxiety accidentally. So I kind of was sneakily helping my anxiety, and I totally knew at the time. I was like, oh, this is really helpful, actually. But I was like, but it's migraines, it's just migraines, I have migraines. And then I became a pastor, and I was really trying to hold it together, and I started having panic attacks on the stage. As I was preaching, I would leave, I'd have to leave and go run to the bathroom, and totally physical panic attacks. I wanted to blow up my marriage, I wanted to just get a new life. I was blowing up my life, and then hated everyone and everything, and thought, maybe I should start with myself. I don't know. I'm just gonna, everyone is terrible. What if I just started myself? Started some therapy. And my husband, I was like, I'm gonna go to therapy. He was like, oh, and we didn't talk about stuff like that. And so but I went and found out it's me. Hi. And also it's him. Hi. And we're all a mess, you know. So first did the deep trauma work on my family, my life growing up, and the pains of my life and the pains of my growing up, things my family had held and we hadn't talked about. Worked through all of that. Was on medicine for panic attacks, was on medicine for the situational anxiety, got off it, came here, and then everything fell apart again 14 years later. And I thought I was living my dream. I'm in Africa. Went to a doctor multiple times because I kept getting sick, and she was like, I think you have depression. I laughed in her face. I'm living my dream. I'm in Africa. And went home and I was like, it's possible. So finally got more therapy. Oh, and when I was in my 20s, I also got cognitive behavioral therapy. That was the therapy to change my mindset patterns. Back here, I start in therapy again, finally get a generalized anxiety disorder diagnosis, which means anxiety has always been living in my body, my best and my worst day. It was such freedom. And starting getting therapy and just starting learning mindfulness techniques coming into my body. What Andy did at 19 is what I did at 40. So I finally started coming into my body, just accepting my anxiety. This is who I am. Laughing at it, enjoying it, seeing it for strengths and weaknesses, and just loving myself as I am. It's just how I am made. And I'm a person of God. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made with anxiety. There's not a mistake. And so that's been a lot of freedom in my journey, is just accepting that. And I think that's a big journey that I wish I'd done earlier. I hope my kids do. Okay, we have a couple more questions. I want to talk about, we're talking about anxious kids, but what happens when you have anxious parents? So how do we help our kids when the parents are struggling with anxiety? So maybe I'll ask them, I'll start here. Kirsty, how would you, if a parent comes to you or a parent and child come to you, you can see that the parent is spinning also and the child is also spinning. How do you begin to address, and how does a parent begin to address anxiety when they're also spinning in it?
Well, I think it's important to be educated, to understand your own anxiety, to develop your own coping strategies. Because how can you help your anxious child if you're not managing your anxiety yourself? And having anxiety is unbelievably difficult, as you can hear. I have generalized anxiety disorder as well. And I have an anxious child, but not chronically anxious. He just gets anxious in my stomach. So just I use mindfulness techniques. So I use little clips that you listen to and you follow, and so I've given them to him, and he finds them very helpful before he goes to sleep when he's anxious. So I think imparting your coping strategies, you have to be able to, as you said, stop. I'm parking this. I have to deal with this now, and also allowing them to talk.
Yeah.
You know, letting them sit down and talk to you about how they're feeling, their fears, and have open communication in the family about anxiety. You know, my husband's very, everyone's anxious in this house. And actually, you are the worst of all. Except you don't think anything's wrong with you. Just the open communication and naming it. For a long time, it's sort of been kept under wraps, and it's you just need to get on with it. We can't have that kind of attitude.
No.
We can't get on with it, so how can we expect them to get on with it?
No, I think that's so wise. I'm going to come to you in a minute because you've dealt with a very anxious parent and probably a couple others. And just any outside tips as a teacher, how to help us anxious parents. I am an anxious person, anxious parent, and I think you're right. Education is the first thing because anxiety will look different in your kid. But I think I find it empowering to know that I'm not crippled by my anxiety. And I have days, we all have moments when none of us are, super men or women. But to know that I'm constantly managing and learning and inquisitive about my anxiety. So I'm constantly learning about it, learning techniques, learning different ways to look at it. I do the same thing with ADHD. So I think the same thing if you're a parent of a neurodivergent kid. So I'm a neurodivergent mom and a neurodivergent child, anxious, and we're just, you should have Mark come to our house, and he will love your house even more because we are a mess at our house. There's all the feelings, all the brain chemistry. But I think if you can, as a parent, if you're anxious, if you can learn and become empowered in it, it becomes something to be curious about. It becomes something that you can talk about, and I find it actually really empowering I relate to it. And I remember my son was diagnosed at 1.5 with autism. And I remember a funny thing kept coming up early on is we'd be like, he won't eat that. And I'd be like, well, it's terrible actually. And he wouldn't wear pants. And I'm like, but they are the worst. And I was just relating to everything. And I feel like the more I become comfortable with my brain and the things I like and don't like and my anxieties, the more that I can create space for my kids to accept themselves and then also to work through it, So my son might be anxious about this soccer tournament or this new team, but he wants to work through it. So I'm anxious about things and I walk through it. So together we walk through it and I can relate, I can understand. I think it's important that there are times to park your anxiety as a parent. Like the kid gets to be anxious, the kid gets to monologue for 5 hours about their anxiety, the kid gets to have a meltdown, within reason. Like it's the kid's time to lose it. It's not our time. And so that's where I think I've really had to grow because my daughter who has ADHD really triggers me and I want to lose my mind at her and she always loses her mind at me. It's very triggering, but it's not my turn. I'm the parent. I can have a meltdown later, but in that moment, I have to be the parent and hold the space. And that's what wasn't given to me. And again, hearing Andy's story is so beautiful. Because you need to unravel as a child, you're learning and it's messy. And the only way to learn is becoming totally unraveled and then someone saying, okay, now what do we choose? Now what do we choose? That's so cool. So as parents, you can be whatever you are, whatever your brain is, whatever your chemistry is, but there are times to park it and to put your kids first and create that space for them. And we can do that. We can do that. And sometimes we need help. Might need medicine or therapy. We might need help to do that. We might need some strategies, but we can do that.
It's not easy though, because sometimes it's a really bad day, and it's not so easy to. Right now, I'm getting my head around this, and I'm helping my child. And to just say, look, I'm feeling really anxious today. I'm not having a good day, and then it's open, and everyone, okay, mom needs some space. Or
that is very important too. We have days where at the end of the day, it's 8, 9 in bed, and I'm like, I've hit my quota for peopling and words, and whatever it is, they know tomorrow I'm there. But I do have limitations that are different than my husband, and not all people have a spouse that can jump in. We tag team a lot because I have big limits. But also to save your kid, I'm just not able. That's okay. I love you. I see you. Tomorrow we're going to come back to this. I'm so sorry, but I just can't. I think that's a great thing, actually, because I grew up thinking I had to be superhuman because my parents modeled that. We're just us.
But I see you at the gym, so it's
am.
important because you do things
Gym.
that are for yourself.
I thought you were saying I'm really strong. You mean I take care of myself? Yes, I do. No, I'm really into, as an anxious person and as a neurodivergent person, taking care of myself. And my kids are in school, so that's my time. Is like I got to get in my lanes and take care of myself, and then it's just like free for all after that. It's really important to take care of yourself. My husband doesn't need all that care to his soul. Yes.
So I had a very anxious first child, and it's interesting to hear your story. And I'm very upset with myself not to really have understood it, but going through it because we all suffered. The whole family suffered, you know. And she was a very unhappy child, but she's a very happy adult. But what I'm learning here is that happiness is maybe also just short-lived, and something else could come later.
Yeah.
But in that time, I often felt I wish there was support for us, the parents, because you're right, you can't always hold it together because it can be like a war zone inside there when a child, especially when they're super intelligent.
Yeah. No, you can't.
Because they manipulate the situation at the same time that they are feeling that anxiety.
They are. And how it affects the other siblings, we could do a whole nother talk on that.
Exactly.
Because to hold space for the other ones. I think we do need help. And I mean, I joke, but I need a lot of help from a lot of people. So I have mentors, I have very good friends, I have support groups, I have people I have therapists that I pay, and I know not everyone has that luxury. But there are pastors that can do counseling for free, you know, like I think you have to fight for support. And I've had to fight for support because I'm not even close. I'm very, very fragile, emotional, like I'm very raw, but I want my kids to have something different than I had. And I'm not doing it perfectly, and none of us here are, but I just want them to feel safe to come undone and to work out their stuff, as messy as it is. And then fall apart, but start to feel like I can move forward in this and do it together. Because that's the thing, is I had to do it alone, and only later in life did my like messy, undone self get accepted. You know, I think I just held it. I mean, I can't even. I think all my friends knew I was a mess, but like, I mean, I got married to someone being like, I am super Sarah, and you know, we do a lot of therapy to like undo that because I'm a mess, and like we've got to relearn. You know, so I mean. Kids and anxiety in marriage, that's a whole nother talk.
The same as a teacher in the classroom. We only spend 5 hours a day with them. But there's very seldomly a day where I go home and I'm not emotionally exhausted. Because we're taking on all the emotions all the time. One kid's like super stoked, they've just made Western Province hockey. And then you've got another kid who's really suffering. And so also teachers, we often need help, and that's why I said earlier, is that we need to be educated on how to deal with not only their anxiety, but how we then go home to our partners and our families, how we can regulate our emotions, because often we can take it out on each other. And then my fiance is also a teacher, so she's had her day full of emotions, and I have mine, and then sometimes we then have our own emotions, and I think all of us need help. We need
I believe all teachers need to be
They
debriefed.
do. Any helping profession. But I think that's why we're the adults here in the room, and we're smart, and we have Google, and we have programs. I'm always listening to another talk. There's such incredible Child Mind Institute, for instance. They're this organization. They do talks all the time. They do groups all the time. Like there's so many resources out there, so much information. And then you got to figure out what you need, you know? So I need exercise, I need walks, I need time alone, I need a turtle in my bed, I need good friends, I need different kinds of friends, I need more than just my husband, I need different places to debrief. I need a lot more than some people, but I am unapologetic because my kids need all of me. Like they need my best soul, and we're a mess. Like the therapy jar is thick in our house, like for what they'll need someday. You know, we don't even know what we're doing wrong now, but you know, they'll tell us soon. Don't worry. So I'm not saying I'm doing it perfectly, but I'm fighting for kids that grow into adults that love who they are and exist in the world, and then want to have a relationship with me still and with my husband still. That's the goal. So I've got to give what I can give, and give, but myself. And you can't, if you're pushing down your own anxiety, and if you're pretending to keep it together, and if you're losing your mind, that all comes out. You can't fake it with your kids. You can fake it with your husband. I actually faked it to myself and my husband for many years. I was a fake version of myself. With your kids, you just can't. You really just can't. They really do receive what's in there. And so we are smart. We can do this. We can work on ourselves a little bit each day to be the best version of ourselves for them. I think, and for ourselves too. It's also fun to be like, you know, anxious and neurodivergent, but also happy. That's fun. It's really fun. Exercise helps. Okay, what would you say, and then we'll wrap it up with one final question. What would you say to parents? I came to Henry many times with a not great tone of, everything's wrong, and Kieran's, and she's bullied, and she's crying, and panic attacks, and I came at him. I'm an anxious parent. What would you say, like a general thing to us parents, like you're seeing them in the classroom, you're seeing what they're holding. Yeah, what would you say to the parents that have anxious kids? Anxious or not, but what would you say?
It's so difficult because we don't only have 34 learners, we also then have the mom and dad of those learners. So we've got 180 kids. And the first like instinct of a parent is to protect their child.
Yeah.
But it's so weird because I don't remember you being like that at all.
I remember where I was.
I remember a lot.
I was in my driveway
messages.
and I called you one time shouting at you.
I remember that. That was a lollipop moment.
That was a special.
It's so difficult because, as everyone said, every kid deals with anxiety differently. I actually think as the years have gone on, I've actually realized that sometimes the parents' anxiety can be the biggest problem.
Yeah.
For instance, we went on a grade 7 camp recently. And I had this huge email about how their son was not ready to stay out, and can she stay close by, and is it okay if she, like, I tell this boy that his mom is really close, and when I actually ended up taking the kid out of the class to have a conversation, he was like, "Sir, I'm fine." Like, my mom's like all on my grill about this, like, she like, I haven't spent a night out, and like, so I think sometimes the pressure comes from the parent, and the anxiety sometimes spills it onto their kids. So my best piece of advice is often to allow your children, I know this is difficult, especially at 13 years old, 14, 15, to make their own decisions. We also often get emails about, oh, my kid really can't do the orators competition. They don't like speaking out in front of people. They really like nonsense. I've had a kid that's come up whose parents asked me not to, and they ended up in the semi-finals of the orators competition. So just allow your kids to express how they're actually feeling, and allow them to come to school and deal with these challenges by themselves. Because sometimes as parents we want to jump straight away and protect, and we only sometimes hear it from our kids' perspective. Mom, like, these kids are bullying me, like this is going on, and we hear one perspective. Allow them to fight through those battles by themselves, because you're actually enabling them more in the long run. If you're going to continue to protect them, they're never actually going to be able to protect themselves in the long run.
It's true. We do all have to go through it. It's difficult.
So difficult.
If you're anxious, any parent, it's difficult to watch your kids struggle. If you're anxious, it's really hard.
It's weird though, because when I was at school, like, if my parents came to a teachers meeting, I was nervous. Like, my parents believed the teacher. But nowadays I feel like it's actually the opposite. Things have changed.
I know.
The teacher's at fault, and before the parent has the actual information.
I know. It's true.
It's like, what
It's
have
true.
you done?
It's true.
So sometimes it is difficult, but take a step back and hear the full story. Let them fight their own battles, and you'll find that actually they'll find coping mechanisms and they'll become stronger.
Yeah, and there are times to intervene, but I think you'll know, and I think to trust a teacher. Most of them are Henry's. Well, no one's Henry's. He's awesome, obviously. But like, trust them. Trust what they're seeing. Trust what they're seeing, a different side of your kid, and it's really important that you hear what they're seeing, even if what you're seeing is something else. That's okay. This side in school is real too. You know, it's not just what's happening at home.
And often the parents that trust us the most, we trust them the most. Often parents that don't trust us with our jobs, we often find it very difficult to build that relationship. You get this email from Mary, and you're like, oof, it's Mary again. Junk email. Sorry, Mary, I didn't get your email. No, but if the parents do, and they build a connection, actually get to know you, and you partner with your teachers, you often find that there's support from both ends.
And these teachers, they want to navigate through this gnarly stuff. Like, my daughter had the gnarliest year ever in grade 7 with Henry.
We wouldn't use the word want.
What?
We would do want to, but we also sometimes don't want to.
You didn't want to. This one was the gnarliest thing ever, because it was multiple sides of monstrosity, children, but and parents. But he cares about kids. Teachers care about your kids, and they want to partner with you to help the kid. They also care most about the kid. So if you come saying, I trust you, I respect you, how can we find a way for this child that we both love? That's the way to come at it. I trust you, thank you for what we've done, build them up. Like, start there. You'll get a lot farther. Okay, last question, and then we're going to be done. If you have questions, we're going to close, and if you want to come ask any of us, you can questions. And then before I ask the last thing, there's so I'm becoming a life coach. I'm in the middle of training. I'm part of a network called Integer Network. We are hosting an online event called Compassionate Parenting, led by Andrea's dad. He's a good one. He's brilliant. This is like his life's work. So it's online for free. It's on Zoom. Come grab one of these if you want Compassionate Parenting. That's just a free resource we thought we'd share. I have my book that I'm selling. I also have a card if you want to talk to me more. My book is about our journey with autism and our son. But that's all just aside because I will forget that. Also, please come chat with us, but I want to honor time and close after we're done with this. So I'd just like to hear from Andy and myself. What's one thing you wish your parent had known in those days that you couldn't get out?
Yeah, I think I wrote down a few like wishes of what I wanted my parents to know, but I know that they tried their best, which I think every parent does. But I think a big focus was on how do we fix this? And it's not something you fix. It's something you journey with and you learn about and you deal with. And so there was always a solution, but I never wanted the solution. I wanted the space. And I wanted the feelings to be acknowledged and to be seen and noticed for what it was. Because those things come up still today. I just have the tools to deal with it myself, or to actually call my mom and have a chat about it. And so I wrote down, I wish my parents stopped trying to fix it and focus more on trying to educate ourselves. So now I was like, oh, did I mean themselves? I was like, no, I wanted us to educate ourselves together. And that, sometimes, it's hard. And it also will be okay. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in that moment, maybe in 10 years. But I do believe that with the right ideas and intentions, it will eventually be okay.
I love that. Well said. Yeah, I think I'd want to know that, like, I'm good, I'm not broken, I'm not crazy, I'm not a mess, like, just as I am, even in that worst moment, that I'm loved. Just there, and it's not a problem to be fixed. But I'm a person, and together we are going to navigate. Because if you're a person with anxiety, some of your kids will just have anxious moments or seasons, especially if you're always with anxiety. You have to learn to journey with it and embrace it. It's a part of you. And so the sooner you can learn to love that part of yourself and accept that part of yourself, and just, this is me, and I'm extra sensitive, and I have big feelings, and it comes out different than other people. The sooner you can just embrace that yourself, that's freedom. I really feel that. I think people pray that anxiety leaves, and I think God can do anything, but for me, I'm just always going to carry this, and it's a gift to carry it. It's heavy, and it is messy, and it comes out awkwardly, and it's hard to carry. But it is a gift, and I feel the world differently, and I feel those who go through it differently, and I'm glad I do. And I just want us to create a place where our kids are just loved and they're good, just in that, just today, they're loved and they're good. What a revolutionary world we would create if that's what it was, because then you have the power and the space to work it out, So that's us. Henry is an incredible teacher. Now you're all going to want him. Andrea, you're going to be incredible in everything you do. I just can't even wait, and I'm going to be right there every single second. Kirsty, you can get her details. She is from the KS Mediation. Am I saying that right? I keep saying
KS
Counseling Mediation. Thank you. She's a brilliant, as you can tell, a brilliant counselor, and really has real life lived experience in all of this. So please reach out to her. Come ask us any questions. But thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'll put these here if anyone wants to grab that. Please feel free to come chat to us, to each other. And I did tape it, so.